トビデオ
It's been a hot minute since we last checked on the Gall Force franchise, hasn't it? Ooh, Gall Force. You are truly one of the unsung anime of the 1980s. Everything that is appealing about science fiction from this era is jammed into this meta-series. Epic space battles, cute girls armed to the teeth, and equally liberal amounts of nudity and 80s hair. It is by no means the best 80s franchise out there, but it is definitely one of the most entertaining. But it's time for some perspective. Let us transport your minds all the way back to 1987. You're a dirtbag otaku in Japan, spending your hard-earned dollars on VHS tapes of brand new anime. You're a fan of this anime that came out last year called Gall Force. It's a flawed but decent enough anime, and one that has a real sense of finality when it came to its ending. By the time the credits roll, most of the main cast is dead, the mission has been complete, and the sole survivor of the Starleaf crew and the Solnoid-Paranoid hybrid have settled on the planet to spawn something called the human race. And if the last part of that sentence was confusing, it's your own fault for not watching the video I did on the first anime before watching this. What I'm getting at here is that creating an entire franchise from an anime that has such a set-in-stone ending with very little wiggle room for a sequel is a tall order. And yet, Art making AIC were somehow able to do it.
This thing's old! That's a third cycle Bronze D anti-ship assault trooper, a real fossil! The pilot's still inside!
So, anyone remember Luffy, the bull-headed, foul-tempered fighter pilot, the girl who somehow had the most 80s sense of fashion out of all of them, the girl who gave so little fucks that she could strut around the command bridge fully nude and give the rest of the crew the business?
Take it easy! Real flying works up a sweat, so I took a shower. This crate's like an oven. What are you girls doing, baking cookies?
AKA the most memorable character in the original Gall Force movie, despite the fact that she was also the first one to die.
Brandy, it's you. At least you're not alone out here.
They brought her back. A decade after the incident with the crew of the Starleaf, the war between the Solnoids and Paranoids is still raging on, with both sides taking heavy losses, including the destruction of both of their home planets. Solnoid forces wind up stumbling across the mech that Luffy was killed in, with her body still perfectly preserved within. They are able to revive and catch her up on what has happened since she became a stiff in space.
What do you mean by that?
They used them. The planet destroyers. All of them, and we have lost our homeworlds.
Oh my god.
From there, Luffy joins a Solnoid crew consisting of a whole nother group of cute girls. Shieldy, Spee, Amy, and Caddy, who's an identical unit of the Caddy on the Starleaf because, if you remember, she was a robot. But soon, the crew finds out that the next battle with the Paranoids takes place on the solar system where planet Earth is located. The Solnoid Command plans to use a brand new system destroyer to wipe out the Paranoids once and for all, but not only at the cost of half the Solnoid army, but the planet where the new lifeform and the Starleaf survivor have taken up residence.
While the Second Fleet engages the enemy, the flagship and the other ships withdraw outside the system. They fire the destroyer and everything in the Ninth System will be destroyed. Forever.
It ultimately comes down to Luffy to choose between her duties as a soldier or the continuing existence of life in the universe. Released in November 21st, 1987, Gall Force 2 Destruction is the follow-up that established Gall Force as a franchise. It's the anime that better establishes what Gall Force is about as a whole. If you just watch the original movie by itself, you would come away from it thinking that it's a serviceable space opera anime with lots of charm, action, and melodrama that it kind of pulls off despite a lot of it being cribbed from other, better sources. But Destruction, despite its shorter length, does what a good sequel should do. It expands on the universe the story takes place in, better develops established characters, and most importantly, builds on major themes that were just only touched on in the original source material. Does this mean that Gall Force 2 is better than the previous installment? Well, how about we see for ourselves if that is true or not. On the technical side, there's almost nothing I really can't say that I haven't already said in my previous video on Gall Force. It's still an anime that, in spite of a mid-tier budget, really goes out of its way to make these space battles look appropriately awesome. In fact, I would even go so far to say that the battle scenes are more technically impressive than they were in the original, a lot of which can be laying at the feet of Masami Obari, who we honestly haven't talked about in a while, but you totally understand why he was able to get so many big breaks in the 90s, considering he animated scenes like this. But I think the best animation of destruction comes from the destruction. This anime is just wall to wall with explosions, and each one of them feels so painstakingly animated to ensure the right amount of big energy that is constantly radiating off the screen. The most memorable being this shot where the system destroyer's laser fires and just barely misses the sun. This entire shot was animated by animation legend Shinya Ohira, known for drawing some of the most richly detailed scenes in anime, budget be damned. This very shot is famous amongst Sakuga heads as one that Ohira possibly labored 3 months over just so he could get it looking absolutely perfect. But even with all the huge explosions and self-destructive perfectionism, one thing I really need to commend Destruction on is being a lot more tonally consistent with their character animation. Destruction is a darker and sort of more introspective sequel than the original, which leaves zero room for comedic moments like they had in the original. So we get less of those wacky moments of characters turning into a chibi for a gag when they just held a somber funeral for their captain not just 2 minutes ago. With those comedic elements removed, the tone is kept more consistent throughout, and it allows the audience to focus on the story better. Right out of the gates, we gotta give a round of attaboys to the writers for making the most correct decision in planning a sequel for the original Gall Force film. By that I mean they do the right thing by bringing back the most important character in the Gall Force series, and I'm not just saying that because she's a pretty lunkhead. Having Luffy be the centerpiece of the Gall Force sequel was a good call because not only did she have the most personality of the entire main cast of the original film, but she also was the only one that had any semblance of a character arc. Luffy begins the story as a decorated, hard-headed Maverick-style pilot who doesn't play by the rules.
Why don't you shut up, little girl, and just let me drive?
But as the film goes on, we start to see another side of her as someone who is harboring a ton of survivor's guilt and battle fatigue. She sees no value in the medals she has won, only considers herself a good soldier because she is just good at surviving battles, and may even secretly harbor a death wish of some kind. It's a start of a character arc, but we don't really get much further because Luffy winds up being killed off before the movie is even halfway done. So to bring her back and really kickstart a dormant character arc was the only true way to start a sequel. Plus, out of all the original cast to bring back, she's the only one whose corpse wasn't thrown into hyperspace or completely reduced to atoms. As for how she's treated in the sequel, Luffy's character definitely gets built on a lot more. She's still angry and hard-headed, but not in a way that's played for laughs. The side we see most of Luffy in this anime is her being this damaged soldier who's jaded from all the horrors of war, made worse after being caught up on all the events of the past decade. One scene that sticks out in particular is of her just silently staring at a battle-damaged fighter android, and her obviously being affected by it. This moment feels like one of self-reflection with how Luffy sees herself. Near the end where Luffy is given the choice between stopping the Solenoid System Destroyer or going out to fight a pointless battle where she will be used as cannon fodder, she initially takes the latter option. Luffy doesn't fight for glory or her people, she fights because it's her job as a soldier. A job she sees herself as being nothing more than a disposable weapon to be used up and thrown away. And if she has to be a statistic that her superiors deem an acceptable loss, so be it.
I don't care. If I'm to be cannon fodder for them, if that's the plan, then I don't care. It's my duty.
It's good that Luffy was given so much to do in this anime because it's her very existence that ends up carrying a lot of the anime story-wise. Luffy's supporting cast in this venture is almost even more underdeveloped than last time, but characters like Rabby and Pony, generic and one-note as they were were still characters you could still have a good grasp of who exactly they were. You don't get that feeling with Shieldy, Spee, and Amy, because we don't spend enough time with them to get a full glimpse of their whole personality. Like, I guess Shieldy's supposed to be a more by-the-book but still aggressive officer, Spee likes to play video games in her spare time, and Amy is supposed to be the embodiment of some of Kenichi Sanada's various fetishes, but the anime doesn't really have time to balance their development as characters with Luffy's, and it causes them to feel more like chess pieces in the anime's narrative overall. Their lack of personality is worsened by their designs not even being nearly as distinct as the previous cast. Shieldy is basically just Rabby with a dye job. At least Caddy is different from her original counterpart, who was mostly there to be a red herring turned plot device. She acts as the sort of moral center of the group that ultimately convinces them to save planet Earth, so I guess that's something. The overall lack of character is made even worse when you realize that, despite the 45-minute runtime, Destruction has a shocking amount of padding. Any one of the scenes that's not centered around the action or Luffy are mostly centered around exposition, and the anime is structured in such a way to stretch out every scene to its limit. As a consequence, it ends up killing a lot of the drama. For instance, when they recover Luffy's body, there's an extended scene of the crew attempting to revive her. It has a lot of build-up and ends with them thinking they failed. Shieldy's about to give up and walk out, but not before she turns and says, just try it again.
Tagger KIA.
Aye aye.
Try it again.
Aye aye!
And what do you know, it works. Just call that the "did you try jiggling the switch" method of resurrecting the dead. Another example is during the big battle of Yevon-style attack on the Solenoid System Destroyer, the party comes to a big door where the core is located, and Caddy goes on a huge emotional spiel about how she is willing to blow herself up to open the doorway.
Don't forget, I'm the one who brought you all here.
No, you didn't. We all chose to come. Even if you destroy this door, there are 5 more just like it behind it. Please, don't do it.
But luckily for her, Luffy has her "I changed my mind kid" moment at the nick of time and blasts open the door so they can finally finish off the System Destroyer, which they do with no casualties on their parts. And I bet you were all waiting for me to comment on this, so here we go. Boy, is this not a good dub.
I guess that's 2 I owe you there, Shieldy. That was incredible. You really lived up to your reputation. But now I'm out of ammo too.
This was a 90s Central Park Media dub if there ever was one, and it does a spectacular job of having the actresses say their lines with all the energy and conviction of someone reading the ingredients of a shampoo bottle while on the toilets.
I know, this must be a shock to you. You've got to try and think about what we've said. Nobody's going to force you to join us.
I mean, not even the presence of Rachel Lillis and an unrecognizable Jessica Calvello can salvage this. So yeah, for all the improvements in some areas, the story and presentation of Destruction is still similar to its original counterparts. Entertaining, but heavily flawed. But still entertaining. For as much grief as I give this anime for stretching out nearly every scene, that does have the positive aspect of stretching out every action scene, which milks all the good space opera style dreadnought battles and dogfights for all they're worth. And I just can't help but get hyped like a little fanboy whenever the anime launches into the original's theme when things are about to get dangerous.
Just a few more blocks. Let's go.
But in spite of the foibles and how the story is constructed, I did mention that a huge point in Destruction's favor was how it handled its themes. What about that? Throughout the Gall Force franchise, the main theme is the overall pointlessness of war, particularly endless war. We don't get an explanation as to why the Solenoids and Paranoids are fighting in the first place, and there doesn't need to be. Whether the war started out as justified or not is irrelevant. Have a war drag on long enough and it begins to lose all meaning. Cool looking space battles be damned. This theme was touched upon slightly in the original Gall Force. The species unification project was brought about by leadership on both sides who saw no end to the war and needed an exit strategy to ensure the survival of both species. Of course, it was only really touched upon when the anime wasn't too busy having trippy music video sequences. Destruction, being a lot more focused in its plotting, is more open about the pointlessness of war in general. In the past decade since the Species Unification Project, the war has only gotten worse. Both species have had their home planets destroyed, thus making peace no longer an option for either side. At this point, the war is just going to come down to whoever's left alive to turn out the lights and lock the door. Even the leadership on both sides have just become completely consumed with destroying each other and are just throwing wave after wave of soldiers and spaceships in an attempt to weaken the other side, all while being completely consumed by their own propaganda.
Brave solenoid warriors!
Our main fleet, led by the flagship Traverser, has successfully engaged and destroyed the enemy fleet in their home system. The paranoid homeworld has finally been destroyed.
It's in this environment where we study Luffy, a soldier who is incredibly gifted, but at the cost of her just being completely broken on the inside. She has fully embraced the nihilism of being just another disposable unit forged on the battlefield in the service of a forever war. Someone that, despite their skills, is easily replaced. And this is where the moral conflict comes into play. She refuses to go after the system destroyer because what difference does it make? Not only is attacking what is essentially a space station hidden in a planet with just 4 mechs a plan that is fraught with grim odds, even if they do take it down, it's still not going to bring an end to the war. But after some soul searching, she ultimately decides to join up with her new crew and defend the hope of a new future. Luffy realizes that she's more than just a faceless soldier performing her duties of dying for a worthless cause. Instead, she can live for a worthy one. This is why I think Gall Force 2 Destruction is a much more thoughtful sequel. Even though some of its flaws with storytelling and characters still linger and weigh the franchise down from becoming a truly fantastic piece of space opera goodness, there's still a lot to talk about in this sequel. Not only do you get some top tier sci-fi action that almost surpasses its previous entry, but you also get a better understanding of Gall Force's best character. Let's face it, Luffy is the face of the Gall Force franchise, both as a character and as eye candy. Without her, this franchise would be sorely lacking in numerous areas. Of course, this isn't the last we'll see of her. We still have plenty of Gall Force to get through. Will the franchise keep building on its narrative and fix its overall flaws to become a righteous 80s classic? Or will it sink into a sloppy mess, try to reinvent itself, and lose any and all characteristics that make Gall Force so appealing in the first place? Everything will be answered in due time, my friends. In due time, indeed.